Deep in the forgotten corners of General Motors' muscle car legacy lie machines so rare, so secretive, they barely existed at all. These weren't showroom heroes or magazine cover stars, special order terrors, factory-built anomalies, and high-performance ghosts that never saw a brochure or commercial. This is the hidden history of GM's most elusive muscle cars. 12 machines that roared in the shadows and then vanished, leaving only legends behind. The 1970 Chevrolet Nova Yenko Deuce, Copo 9010, was not just a Nova and not just another one of Don Yenko's creations. It was a strategic response to a dying breed of muscle. A final chapter in the legend of factory-sanctioned performance cars built for speed freaks who knew exactly what they wanted and didn't care if the world was changing around them. It was the end of an era born right as the golden age of muscle was burning itself out. By the start of the 1970s, Don Yenko, former race car driver, Chevrolet dealer, and performance visionary, was facing a new kind of resistance. He had made his name in the late 60s by ordering special batches of Camaros, Chevelles, and Novas through Chevrolet's Central Office Production Order, COPO program. These weren't available at your average dealership. Through COPO, he bypassed GM's internal limitations on engine size for certain models, dropping 427 big blocks into compact and mid-size Chevrolets and selling them to a generation hungry for power. It worked brilliantly until it didn't. The 1970 model year brought a storm of regulation, rising insurance premiums, and a shift in public sentiment. Young buyers who once flocked to 425 horsepower street terrors were now being punished by their insurance agents. At the same time, GM was getting uneasy with the idea of backdoor supercars slipping through the cracks of its own policies. The party was ending. But Don Yenko didn't want to quit, he just had to adapt. So instead of another brutal big block car, he went a different route. He went small block, lighter, revier, more efficient. The result was the 1970 Yenko Deuce, based on the compact Chevy Nova but loaded with serious firepower. The Deuce was a factory hot rod ordered under Copo 9010 and delivered directly to Yenko Chevrolet in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. Unlike the 427 cars, the Deuce didn't scream about its power, it hinted at it. It looked aggressive but not overdone. It was the muscle car for a more cautious, insurance-conscious time. Under the hood was the 350 cubic inch LT1 V8, the same high-compression, high-revving engine used in the Corvette and Camaro Z28. It made 360 horsepower and 380 lb-ft of torque, more than enough for a car as light as the Nova. With a 780 CFM Holleycarb, aluminum intake manifold, solid lifters, and forged internals, the LT1 was no compromise. It was the most advanced small-block Chevy offered at the time, and in the Nova's tight frame, it turned the car into a compact rocket. Yenko didn't just stop with the engine. Each Deuce got heavy-duty F41 suspension, power front disc brakes, a Monte 4-speed or turbo 400 automatic, and a 12-bolt rear axle, some with posy traction. Visually, they were unmistakable. Rally wheels, a blacked-out grille, special Yenko and Deuce side graphics, rear spoiler, and front chin spoiler. Inside, the cars kept things modest. Basic bucket seats, floor shifter, and a dash badge letting you know this wasn't your uncle's Nova. This was a purpose-built machine. Only 170 Yenko Deuces were built in 1970, making it one of the rarest muscle cars of the entire decade. Part of that rarity is because GM didn't exactly advertise them. The Copo process was a quiet one, essentially an internal workaround never meant for mass marketing. Yenko himself handled the promotion, selling them through his dealership network or to customers who knew how to ask the right questions. You had to want a Yenko Deuce to even know it existed. And then, almost immediately, it was gone. 1970 was the last year Yenko would partner with GM on a Copo program. The insurance crisis, emissions crackdowns, and GM's increasing reluctance to look the other way spelled the end of the backdoor supercar. Don Yenko would continue to dabble in performance cars, but the era of new Yenko-badged factory monsters was over. The Deuce was the last. Today, the 1970 Yenko Deuce occupies a strange but fascinating corner in muscle car history. It doesn't have the brute force aura of a Yenko 427 Camaro or Chevelle, but it's a more refined performance car, one that anticipated the future. It offered big block performance in a small block package, in a lighter, more agile car that didn't scream, "Arrest me." It wasn't trying to dominate a drag strip, it was trying to outrun the end of the era. Collectors prize them today not just for their rarity, but for what they represent. The final act of one of the most influential names in muscle car history. As the muscle car wave crashed into the wall of reality, the Yenko Deuce stood like a last-minute adjustment. One final burst of innovation. One last grin from a dealer who outsmarted Detroit. One surviving owner once put it best: "You didn't drive the Deuce to show off. You drove it because you knew. And if the guy next to you knew too, then you didn't need to say a word." The 1963 Pontiac Tempest Super Duty wasn't just a muscle car before its time. It was a full-on engineering experiment gone mad, a factory Frankenstein that fused drag strip aggression with unconventional design. It wasn't supposed to exist, and yet, for one brief moment, it did. And the result was one of the most outrageous and rarest factory drag cars ever built. Only 12 were made. Most didn't survive. Those that did, they're whispered about in hushed tones by collectors and muscle car historians alike. This was Pontiac at its absolute wildest, right before the birth of the GTO, and arguably even more insane. To understand the Tempest Super Duty, you have to remember what the regular Tempest was supposed to be. Introduced in 1961 as a compact, economy-minded car for budget-conscious buyers, the first-generation Tempest was anything but ordinary under the skin. Pontiac engineers, led by none other than John DeLorean, gave it a rear-mounted transaxle and an independent rear suspension, features practically unheard of in Detroit iron at the time. This gave the Tempest near-perfect weight distribution and strange handling dynamics, which meant it drove more like a European sports sedan than a traditional American compact. But then Pontiac, specifically the division's performance-obsessed engineers, got bored. In late 1962, they took a handful of lightweight Tempest two-door coupes and did the unthinkable. They stuffed in the fire-breathing 421 cubic inch Super Duty V8, a racing engine developed for full-size Pontiacs tearing up the NHRA scene. This wasn't some warmed-over street motor. We're talking forged crank, aluminum dual-quad intake, factory headers, high-lift cam, and conservative power ratings of around 405 horsepower. But in reality, it made much more. The Tempest featherweight shell and rear transaxle layout made it a straight-line terror, delivering brutal launches without the traction issues that plagued traditional front-engine, rear-drive setups. The car was insane. It had torque that could rip asphalt from the street and an exhaust note that roared like a steel mill, melting down. And because of the transaxle and IRS, it didn't just go fast in a straight line. It did so with an eerie balance, unlike anything else in the muscle car era. Pontiac even used aluminum body panels and acid-dipped some components to get the weight under 3,200 norms. These were factory-built race cars, plain and simple. Some ran low 11s in the quarter mile right off the trailer in 1963. Only 12 Tempest Super Duty cars were built, and none were meant for public roads. These were strictly drag strip assassins, built for NHRA competition under the super stock class. But the NHRA was not impressed. The car was too different, too advanced, too unfair. The combination of the lightweight chassis, rear transaxle, and big-inch motor didn't sit well with other competitors, or with the rulebook. Within a short time, the Tempest Super Duty was banned. That might have been the end of the story, except what came next turned these already rare cars into legends. In an act of corporate compliance or maybe embarrassment, Pontiac ordered nearly all of them destroyed. Most were sent back to headquarters and unceremoniously crushed. Only a handful, some say just 6, escaped the jaws of GM's own crusher. A few had already slipped into private hands or were hidden away by dealers and racers who understood what they had. Those cars today are virtually priceless, not just for their rarity, but for the sheer audacity they represent. What makes the 1963 Tempest Super Duty so compelling isn't just the numbers or its rarity, it's what it stood for. This was Pontiac, still just a few years out of the Eisenhower era, building something with architecture closer to a Ferrari than a Fairlane, and then lighting it on fire with drag strip fury. It was a brief glimpse into an alternate reality, a universe where muscle cars evolved with transaxles and balance and lightweight bodies instead of just brute force. One former Pontiac engineer later said, "The Tempest Super Duty was the fastest thing we ever built, and we never built it again." So while the GTO gets the credit for inventing the muscle car, the 1963 Tempest Super Duty was the proof of concept, a rolling paradox, sophisticated yet savage, small yet monstrous, legal for a moment, and then outlawed forever. It came, it conquered, and then it vanished. Almost like it was never supposed to exist. The 1986 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS Era Coupe prototype is one of those rare, mythic creatures of the muscle car underworld. Not just forgotten, but barely even acknowledged in official records. Only 3 were ever built. These weren't just early models or lightly tweaked pre-pros. They were handcrafted, NASCAR-bred test beds that represented the hush-hush beginning of one of the strangest, most aerodynamically obsessive muscle car evolutions of the 1980s. When the 1987 Aero Coupe rolled into dealerships with its sloped rear glass and NASCAR flair, no one talked about these 3 cars. GM didn't want them remembered, and that's exactly what makes them fascinating. By the mid-1980s, NASCAR racing had become a high-speed arms race, and aerodynamics were everything. GM had already seen the Ford Thunderbird slicing through the air with its flush glass and wind-cheating profile, while the boxy Monte Carlo SS, as potent as it was with its 180 AMB305 HO and muscular stance, was pushing more air than a brick in a wind tunnel. Something had to be done if Chevy wanted to remain competitive on the superspeedways. But GM, being GM, wasn't about to greenlight a full redesign. Enter the Aero Coupe, a backdoor solution dressed up as a production option, all to satisfy NASCAR's homologation rules that required race cars to be based on production bodies. Before any public release, Chevrolet quietly authorized the construction of 3 hand-built Monte Carlo SS Aero Coupe prototypes in 1980s. These weren't just styling mock-ups. They were functioning, road-ready aerodynamic experiments. The rear window was sloped at a 20-degree angle, a radical departure from the vertical glass of the regular Monte. It flowed into a subtly resculpted deck lid and spoiler that extended the car's profile and drastically reduced drag. Wind tunnel testing at GM's secretive Warren Tech Center confirmed the improvements. Downforce was up, drag was down, and high-speed stability was dramatically better. The prototypes used a mix of off-the-shelf parts and custom-fabricated bodywork. Much of the rear end was modified by hand, using techniques more common in race shops than on assembly lines. Internally, engineers referred to the program by code names, and even within GM, only a handful of people knew the prototypes existed. They were kept out of the press, hidden from public view, and never photographed officially. One story goes that a prototype was briefly shown to Dale Earnhardt Sr. for feedback, and his enthusiasm helped push the Aero Coupe into limited production. But here's the kicker. When Chevrolet debuted the 1987 Monte Carlo SS Aero Coupe, they never once mentioned the prototypes. No preview to 1986, no early production mules. The 3 1986 Aero Coupes were buried, not literally but figuratively, filed away as internal experiments. Not meant for the public to know or remember. They were never sold. At least one was rumored to have been crushed. The other 2? Their fate remains murky. Some believe they were spirited away by insiders, quietly tucked into private collections, with weekends that never made it to the official books. Others claim they were dismantled for parts or returned to Chevrolet's engineering fleet, stripped of their uniqueness and faded into anonymity. What's left behind is a ghost story. 3 slippery-bodied Chevys that predicted the next year's NASCAR homologation star, but were never officially acknowledged. The Aero Coupe you could buy in 1987, of which just 6 through 52 were built, has since become a niche collectible. But these 1986 cars, they're whispered about at Monte Carlo meets, traded in legends and low-resolution photos, sometimes passed off as customs, sometimes mistaken for fakes. But they were real, and they mattered. They were the beginning of an unlikely marriage between wind tunnel science and Detroit muscle. In the twilight of the carbureted era, while most muscle cars were being choked by emissions and buried under insurance premiums, these three Monte Carlo SS Aero Coupe prototypes hinted at something different. A future where racing still dictated design, even if only for a brief, fleeting moment. A coupe shaped by speed, born in secrecy, and erased from the record books almost as soon as it arrived. The 1971 Buick GSX Stage 1 convertible is not just rare, it is a ghost. It exists on the outer fringes of verified muscle car history, somewhere between whispered legend and ironclad fact. Officially, Buick never offered a GSX convertible to the public. The GSX was a hardtop-only package, meant to give Buick some much-needed street credibility during the height of the muscle car wars. But somewhere in the bureaucratic shadows of GM's mid-level executive offices, something strange happened. One, possibly two, GSX convertibles were built, and they weren't dealer customs. These were factory cars, with full GSX trimmings, spoilers, striping, and most importantly, the brutally underrated Stage 1 455 V8 under the hood. It's one of the greatest unicorns in muscle car lore. To understand why the GSX convertible even came into being, you have to step back and look at Buick's strange role in the muscle car world. Buick was never supposed to be fast. It was the doctor's car, the refined alternative to the Chevelle or GTO. But in 1990, Buick stunned the industry with the GSX Stage 1. With its 455 cubic inch V8, huge torque output, officially an éternel beft at just 20,800 RPM, and street-hugging suspension, the GSX wasn't just fast for a Buick, it was faster than nearly anything else on the road, including the legendary Hemi Cuda. The Stage 1 engine was underrated at 360 HP in 1971 due to SAE net horsepower calculations, but insiders knew it still packed close to 400 real horses. However, by 1971, the muscle car market was beginning to wobble. Insurance rates were skyrocketing. Emissions controls were tightening. GM was already reining things in. Buick, being the conservative division, was on even thinner ice. So when someone inside the company built, or had built, a GSX convertible with the full Stage 1 drivetrain, they weren't creating a new production model. They were coloring way outside the lines. These convertibles are believed to have started life as GS455 convertibles, a model you could buy in 1971. But at some point, someone decided to bolt on the GSX treatment. Hood tack, deck lid spoiler, front air dam, bright striping, the entire Saturn yellow or Apollo white paint scheme. But this wasn't some dealer package or backyard project. The parts came from the factory. The stripes were real. The car matched GM's design and engineering standards. Some believe they were built as executive toys, either for GM brass or high-level Buick insiders. Others suspect they were test mules to gauge potential demand for a GSX convertible that never officially materialized. Either way, they were never announced, never listed in brochures, and never offered to customers. So how many were built? The answer is maddeningly vague. One has been verified through Sloan Museum documentation and appeared at major shows like MCACN, Muscle Car, and Corvette Nationals. Another may exist in private hands but has never been conclusively authenticated. That's it. One confirmed, a second rumored, and a whole lot of speculation. What's beyond doubt is this. The 1971 GSX Stage 1 convertible is one of the most powerful and mysterious machines GM ever let escape. It combined Buick's most potent big block with one of the rarest body styles, wrapped in a wild muscle car paint scheme that no other Buick convertible wore. It wasn't just rare, it was unauthorized. GM had an internal policy that prevented convertibles from being marketed as high-performance halo cars due to safety regulations and internal positioning. The GSX drop top broke every rule. Today, the single confirmed GSX convertible is a museum piece. It's the kind of car that draws hushed reverence from even the most jaded collectors. It represents a moment when someone inside GM defied the corporation's conservatism and built the kind of machine that muscle car fans still dream about. A full-on Buick GSX muscle convertible with the Stage 1 engine, ready to roast tires and turn heads. And yet, it was never supposed to exist. GM denies it. Brochures never listed it. Production records won't confirm it. But we know better. Somewhere in the back rooms of Buick engineering, one or two men decided to make a statement, and what they created became one of the most elusive and desirable muscle cars of all time. The 1971 Buick GSX Stage 1 convertible isn't just rare. It's the kind of car that rewrites what you thought you knew about GM's golden age. The 1966 Chevrolet Biscayne L72 427 stands as one of the most fascinating and elusive figures in the muscle car pantheon, a ghostly legend whispered about among collectors, historians, and drag racing aficionados. This car, in many ways, was the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing, a purebred dragster hidden beneath the most unassuming and unpretentious exterior GM offered at the time. The Biscayne was Chevrolet's entry-level full-size sedan built to be practical, inexpensive, and plain. It was the kind of car you'd expect to see ferrying families to church on Sunday or being used as a fleet vehicle by taxi companies or police departments. It wasn't meant to turn heads or stir emotions. And yet, within that bland bodywork, Chevrolet quietly installed one of its most ferocious power plants, the L72 427 cubic inch V8, packing a factory-rated 425 horsepower. This was the same engine found in the Corvette and some Impala SS models, a brute of an engine with big block displacement, solid lifters, forged internals, and a roaring 4-barrel Holley carburetor that screamed to be unleashed on the drag strip. What made the 1966 Biscayne L72 truly special wasn't just the power, but the philosophy behind it. While Chevrolet was aggressively marketing muscle cars like the Chevelle SS396, Camaro SS, and the iconic GTO, the Biscayne L72 was a secret deal, a factory-built drag car masquerading as a humble sedan. It wasn't found in the brochures or advertised in magazines. Instead, it was ordered through the COPO, Central Office Production Order, program, a loophole in GM's corporate policy that allowed dealers to special order non-standard, high-performance configurations. This program was primarily used for fleet vehicles or to equip police cars with heavy-duty packages, but savvy dealers and racers exploited it to create some of the most legendary muscle cars of the era. The L72 Biscayne was built to be light and fast. By stripping away the usual luxury trappings, no fancy vinyl roofs, no bright trim, no extravagant interiors, Chevrolet ensured that the car stayed as light as possible, improving its power-to-weight ratio dramatically. Under the hood was that monstrous 427 big block V8, backed by either a Monte 4-speed manual or a heavy-duty turbo-hydromatic automatic transmission. The rear end featured a 12-bolt differential, often with aggressive gear ratios like 4.10 or even 4.56, primed for blistering acceleration and wheel-spinning launches. Despite the potential for greatness, these cars were never officially marketed to the public as muscle cars. GM was cautious about promoting excessive horsepower in its fleet cars, especially with the rising tide of emissions regulations and insurance costs looming on the horizon. As a result, production numbers were incredibly low. Estimates vary, but some historians suggest that fewer than 20 Biscayne L72s were ever built in 1966, with some sources putting the number as low as 11. The low production and the covert nature of these cars mean that documentation is scarce, and many of the surviving cars were modified, wrecked, or lost to time. Those few that did survive are now among the most prized and sought-after muscle cars, almost mythical in status. They carry an aura of raw power and underground exclusivity that few other cars can match. These were the sleeper muscle cars before the term sleeper was even coined. Cars that looked like mundane sedans but packed enough punch to embarrass even the fastest Camaros, Mustangs, and Chevelles of their day. On the drag strip, these cars were terrifying. The 427 L72's torque and horsepower allowed the Biscayne to cover the quarter mile in the low 13-second range, an astonishing feat for a full-size sedan of the mid-1960s. The sound alone was enough to turn heads and drop jaws, an earth-shaking roar from that massive big block engine. unfiltered by luxury mufflers or sound-deadening materials. But despite its ferocity, the Biscayne L72 was not a showboat. It didn't flaunt its muscle with flashy stripes, spoilers, or badges. Instead, it blended into the crowd, a stealth predator lurking in plain sight. Collectors today cherish these cars not only for their rarity and performance, but for their unique place in muscle car history. They represent a time when performance was king, but corporate caution and rising regulations forced ingenuity and subtlety. The 1966 Biscayne L72 is a symbol of an underground muscle car culture, a culture that thrived despite the official narratives and marketing strategies of the big automakers. One owner famously described his restored Biscayne L72 as a time capsule that hides its heart beneath the most unassuming skin. It's the kind of car that makes you question everything you thought you knew about muscle cars, because it's not about flash. It's about raw, unfiltered power and the secret thrill of being underestimated. The 1973 Pontiac Trans Am SD455 prototype occupies a nearly mythical place in muscle car lore, a one-of-a-kind machine that embodies the twilight of the muscle car era, a time when raw power clashed head-on with mounting regulatory pressure and shifting market demands. This single prototype was not just a test mule or a design study. It was a concentrated expression of Pontiac's unrestrained performance ambitions before the curtain fell on the golden age of American muscle. To understand the significance of this elusive Trans Am, you have to remember the context of the early 1970s. The muscle car world was facing its toughest challenges yet. The Clean Air Act and other emissions regulations were tightening their grip. Insurance companies were punishing high-performance cars with soaring premiums. And the energy crisis was starting to change consumer priorities. Against this backdrop, Pontiac sought to keep the muscle car flame alive with the SD455, a Super Duty version of the famed 455 cubic inch V8, capable of monstrous torque and horsepower, officially rated at 310 HP, but widely believed to produce far more in reality. The SD455 wasn't just an engine upgrade, it was a statement of intent. Pontiac engineers wanted a car that could deliver brutal performance on the street and the strip while still wearing the Trans Am badge, the brand's halo of performance and style. To push this vision further, Pontiac built a singular pre-production prototype in 1973 that would serve as both a test bed and a showcase of what the SD455 platform could do when freed from production constraints. This prototype was fitted with a radically reworked exhaust system, which likely featured straight-through mufflers in large-diameter pipes designed to maximize exhaust flow and produce a throatier, more aggressive sound that would have been unmistakable on the street. The engine itself was reportedly fitted with high-performance internal components, including beefier valve springs, more aggressive camshafts, and improved cooling and oiling systems that aimed to keep the 455 breathing and running strong under demanding conditions. This combination created a car that was faster, louder, and more ferocious than any other GM product at the time. A true muscle car at a moment when muscle cars were being neutered or canned altogether. But the timing couldn't have been worse. GM management, aware of the growing backlash against muscle cars, insurance penalties, and increasing government scrutiny, reportedly became alarmed at the prototype's sheer potential. This fear wasn't unfounded. Releasing such a powerful vehicle to the public could have invited more regulatory attention and higher insurance costs, threatening Pontiac's broader lineup and brand image. There are accounts that upper management considered scrapping the entire Super Duty program, fearing it would only accelerate the muscle car's demise. After its short life as a test vehicle, the 1973 Trans Am SD455 prototype quietly disappeared. Unlike most concept cars or prototypes that survive in museums or private collections, this one vanished without a trace. Some say it was dismantled and destroyed to keep it out of public hands. Others believe it might still be hidden away in some forgotten GM storage facility or private collection. The lack of photographs or detailed records has fueled decades of speculation and mystery around this singular machine, turning it into a ghost story among muscle car enthusiasts. The importance of the 1973 SD455 prototype is magnified by its timing. This was Pontiac's last real attempt to push muscle car performance before the market forced a shift towards smaller, more fuel-efficient, and less powerful vehicles. The production SD455 cars that followed were hampered by emissions equipment, lower compression ratios, and stricter regulations that sapped power and performance, making the prototype's potential seem like a glimpse of a lost golden age. For muscle car collectors and historians, this car represents the ultimate what-if moment. What if Pontiac had been able to bring this prototype to market? How might it have changed the muscle car narrative? Would it have been a legendary street beast that stood tall against the rising tide of regulation? Or simply a dangerous relic destined to be a forgotten footnote? The unanswered questions only add to its mystique. In the end, the 1973 Pontiac Trans Am SD455 prototype remains a powerful symbol of the muscle car era's final defiant roar, a reminder of the engineering talent, ambition, and raw horsepower that Pontiac was capable of at its peak. Its disappearance only deepens the allure, making it one of the most fascinating lost chapters in American automotive history, a phantom muscle car whispered about by enthusiasts, forever tantalizing with its promise and shrouded in the mystery of its fate. The 1967 Chevrolet Corvette L88 convertible is an icon of American automotive history and a shining, if somewhat overlooked, testament to the raw, unfiltered power and engineering ambition of the muscle car era's fringes. While the traditional muscle car is often envisioned as a mid-size coupe or sedan packing a massive V8 and street credibility, the L88 Corvette convertible takes that concept to an extreme, melding high-performance race engineering with street-legal accessibility, wrapped in a convertible body that screams both exclusivity and speed. GM produced only 20 of these L88 convertibles in 1967, making it one of the rarest and most sought-after Corvettes in existence. This scarcity alone cements its legendary status among collectors and enthusiasts. But it's not just rarity that makes the L88 so revered. It's the uncompromising, almost brutal philosophy behind its design and construction. Unlike other cars of the period, the L88 wasn't crafted for comfort or luxury. It was purpose-built for speed, performance, and competition, with every ounce of unnecessary weight stripped away. The interior was as minimalistic as possible. No radio, no heater, no air conditioning, no sound insulation. The idea was simple: reduce weight to the absolute minimum to enhance performance. This Spartan cabin echoed the bare-bones approach favored by racers, focusing on essentials only. Driving an L88 convertible wasn't about cruising in comfort. It was about pure adrenaline and raw driving experience. Under the hood lurked the heart of the beast, the legendary L88 427 cubic inch big block V8. Although officially rated at 430 horsepower, it was widely known and later proven that this engine actually churned out well over 500 horsepower, a monstrous figure for its time. The discrepancy in power ratings was part of GM's strategy to downplay the car's true capabilities to keep it from cannibalizing their racing programs or falling into the hands of casual buyers unprepared for its fury. The L88's engine featured an array of cutting-edge components designed to maximize power and efficiency, including high-flow aluminum cylinder heads with huge valves, a massive Holley 4-barrel carburetor, aggressive camshaft profiles, and a high compression ratio pushing performance to the edge. The exhaust system was tuned for optimal flow, and the ignition system was beefed up to ensure consistent spark at high RPMs. This was a race engine first and foremost, brutally powerful but demanding in terms of maintenance and drivability. Performance wasn't just about straight-line speed. The L88 convertible came equipped with heavy-duty suspension components, including stiffer springs and shock absorbers, reinforced control arms, and wider tires mounted on specialized wheels. Its chassis was beefed up to handle the extreme torque and cornering forces, while a close-ratio 4-speed manual transmission gave the driver precise control over the car's explosive power delivery. The rear end housed a limited-slip differential with aggressive gear ratios designed for rapid acceleration and controlled power transfer. Despite the car's focus on performance, the convertible body style gave it a rare blend of muscle car ferocity and open-air style. The L88 convertible was not just a weapon on the track, but a rolling symbol of American automotive passion. Scarce, wild, and utterly uncompromising. However, this exclusivity in the high level of mechanical sophistication meant that it was rarely owned by casual drivers. These cars were generally in the hands of serious collectors, racers, or enthusiasts who understood and appreciated the formidable engineering and raw driving experience. Over the decades, the L88 convertible has become a legend, often overshadowed by the coupe version and the more mainstream muscle cars of the 1960s. Yet it remains one of the ultimate expressions of Chevrolet's performance prowess during an era when power and speed were king and rules were made to be pushed to their absolute limits. Today, an original 1967 Corvette L88 convertible commands mind-boggling prices at auction, often soaring into the millions, thanks to its rarity, racing pedigree, and the mystique surrounding its hidden status within GM's lineup. Owning an L88 convertible is not just about having a classic car, it's about possessing a piece of muscle car mythology, a machine born from a time when engineers and racers worked side by side to create machines that blurred the line between street and track. The L88 convertible stands as a monument to a bold era in American automotive history, a time when raw horsepower, innovation, and sheer audacity combined to produce one of the most formidable and fascinating cars ever built. It's a car that, even decades later, still demands respect and awe from anyone lucky enough to see one in person or hear the deep, guttural roar of its legendary big block engine. The 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 Post Coupe occupies a truly unique and enigmatic niche in muscle car history, an exceptional, almost mythical example of what muscle car performance and experimentation looked like at the dawn of the 1970s. While the Oldsmobile 442 is well known for blending aggressive styling with potent V8 power, the W30 package stands out as the ultimate performance iteration, designed to transform this personal luxury muscle coupe into a fearsome drag strip weapon. The W30 offered upgraded suspension, a stronger 455 cubic inch engine variant, heavy-duty components, and a bold presence on the street. However, the post-coupe variant, with its fixed B pillars, was a complete outlier from the norm, and only one such car was ever made, making it a fascinating one-off that has puzzled enthusiasts and historians alike for decades. The typical W30 was a pillarless hardtop or convertible, designed to maximize both style and performance, with sleek lines and open, airy cabin spaces. This post-coupe, by contrast, featured fixed B pillars, giving it a more conventional and solid roofline, something that, on paper, might seem to detract from the muscle car's signature boldness. However, the fixed B-pillar design brought a level of rigidity and structural integrity that was highly beneficial in high-speed and drag racing conditions, allowing the car to better handle the tremendous power and torque produced by the W30's 455 V8 engine. It was likely engineered with the serious drag racer in mind, someone who valued function over form, and who preferred a car that could perform as well in the quarter mile as it looked on the street. Under the hood, this singular post-coupe packed the revered 455 V8 with the W30's distinct enhancements, producing an estimated 370 horsepower. Although this figure might not seem as dramatic compared to some other muscle cars of the era, the W30's strength lay in its overall package: heavy-duty suspension, a stronger drivetrain, and especially those dual snorkel intakes that provided better airflow and more efficient combustion. This wasn't just a car built for cruising, it was built for serious competition, with careful attention to performance details that would help it excel on the drag strip, where every ounce of power and stability counted. GM's decision not to advertise or repeat this post-coupe body style suggests that it was either a special factory experiment, a dealer-specific order, or a corporate test mule designed to evaluate performance tweaks and structural changes under race-like conditions. The fact that only one was ever built adds to the mystique. This was no mass-market vehicle, but rather a unique creation, perhaps intended to push the boundaries of the W30's potential or to test an alternative approach to muscle car design that emphasized durability and performance at the expense of flashier styling. Collectors today regard this rare post-coupe as a priceless artifact from a transitional period when muscle cars were becoming more specialized and less about broad consumer appeal. By 1970, muscle cars were facing increasing pressure from government emissions regulations, insurance costs, and shifting consumer tastes, making cars like the 442 W30 Post-Coupe a last hurrah of raw, unapologetic power before the era's rapid decline. The car's rarity and unusual body style make it a sought-after gem for serious enthusiasts who appreciate the nuances of muscle car history, where factory oddities and one-off specials reveal the experimental spirit of American automakers during that golden era. In essence, this singular 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 Post-Coupe is more than just a muscle car. It's a tangible link to the past, a shadowy relic of the time when builders and racers sought every edge possible. It's a quiet testament to the complex balance between style, function, and raw horsepower. One that was never fully realized or repeated, but remains legendary nonetheless. Seen as a stealthy, understated powerhouse, this unique post-coupe still captures the imagination of collectors and historians, standing as an exclusive, hidden chapter in the story of muscle cars. It reminds us that sometimes the most fascinating machines are those that break the mold, defy convention, and quietly leave an indelible mark on automotive history. The 1972 Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 prototype occupies a unique, almost mythological place in muscle car history. A one-off masterpiece born from a daring yet doomed attempt to resurrect the glory and brute force of late 1960s muscle cars, in an era where such raw performance was rapidly becoming obsolete. By the early 1970s, the muscle car era was already showing clear signs of exhaustion. Rising insurance premiums, increasingly stringent emissions regulations imposed by the EPA, and the oil crisis looming on the horizon meant that high-displacement, high-horsepower cars were quickly losing favor with both manufacturers and consumers. Yet, within the walls of Chevrolet's engineering department, there was still a hunger to push the envelope, a desire to keep the muscle car flame alive, if only briefly. The ZL1 name was a legendary one, first introduced in 1969 on the Camaro, where it referred to an all-aluminum 427 cubic inch big block V8 engine, originally designed for racing applications. This engine was a monster, lightweight compared to the traditional iron block counterparts, but capable of producing upwards of 500 horsepower in race tune. Its presence in the Camaro was brief but electric, giving birth to some of the fastest muscle cars ever made. However, the 1969 ZL1 Camaro was outrageously expensive and built in very limited numbers, primarily as a homologation model for racing. It was a halo car that never really hit mass production or broad consumer acceptance. Fast forward 3 years to 1972. Chevrolet's engineers set out to reintroduce the same aluminum 427 into the new second-generation Camaro body. Unlike the 1969 first-gen Camaro's relatively roomy engine bay, the second-gen car had a tighter design and incorporated the new colonnade styling with thicker pillars and more restrictive packaging. Fitting the massive ZL1 engine into the chassis was a Herculean task. Engineers had to rework engine mounts, upgrade cooling systems, and modify the front end to accommodate the wider engine and its cooling requirements. The result was a prototype that melded race-bred power with the sleek yet controversial new Camaro shape. Testing of the ZL1-equipped Camaro prototype yielded jaw-dropping results. Performance was stunning, with the engine delivering not only enormous horsepower, but also torque that could obliterate competitors of the time. The car's handling, while somewhat compromised by the hefty big block up front, remained surprisingly competent given the package. The prototype was a showcase of what muscle cars were truly about: raw, unapologetic power with aggressive performance credentials. But as promising as the car was mechanically, the timing couldn't have been worse. The muscle car market was rapidly contracting. Emissions standards had tightened dramatically, and this all-aluminum 427, designed primarily as a race engine, was far from compliant with federal regulations. GM's legal and marketing departments raised red flags, warning that producing such a vehicle would invite regulatory penalties and insurance nightmares. The oil crisis of 1973 was just around the corner, and public sentiment was shifting toward fuel economy and practicality. Additionally, the muscle car had begun to lose its youthful swagger, replaced by a new era of compact and subcompact cars. GM executives made the difficult decision to bury the project. The ZL1 Camaro prototype was shelved and stored away, never receiving the official green light for production or even a formal public unveiling. The entire program was quietly erased from the company's public history. Unlike the 1969 ZL1 Camaro, which, while rare, entered limited production, this 1972 prototype would become a ghost, known only to a select few insiders and later muscle car historians and collectors. Over the decades, the 1972 Camaro ZL1 prototype took on legendary status among enthusiasts. Its story represents both the zenith and the twilight of the muscle car era, a symbol of technical brilliance and bold ambitions stifled by external pressures beyond the control of engineers or designers. Only one such prototype was ever built, making it among the rarest and most coveted muscle car relics on the planet. Despite its obscurity, the car embodies the spirit of American muscle, fearless power, engineering innovation, and a rebellious streak against the encroaching tide of regulation and conformity. Collectors and historians view the 1972 ZL1 Camaro prototype as the ultimate what-if of muscle car history. What if GM had found a way to keep this beast in production? Could it have sparked a muscle car revival instead of signaling the genre's slow death? These questions linger in muscle car lore, adding mystique to a car that is rarely seen, scarcely documented, and surrounded by secrecy. Today, the prototype remains a closely guarded artifact, sometimes glimpsed at private collector shows or in archival photographs but never fully revealed to the public. The 1971 Pontiac GTO Judge convertible stands as one of the rarest and most enigmatic muscle cars of the early 70s, a symbol of both the apex and the rapid decline of the muscle car era. By 1971, the Pontiac Judge, once a flamboyant, youthful icon known for its bold colors, wild graphics, and fierce performance, was already a shadow of its former self. Introduced in 1969 as a fiery response to the competition, the Judge had roared into the scene with big block engines and an attitude to match. But just a few short years later, rising insurance rates, stricter emissions rules, and growing government regulations were strangling the muscle car market, forcing manufacturers to dial back power and options. Pontiac's once thriving GTO lineup was no exception. Into this uncertain landscape, GM quietly produced a mere 17 Judge convertibles for the 1971 model year, the absolute twilight of the GTO Judge's brief but legendary run. Unlike earlier, more aggressively marketed versions, these convertibles were never advertised widely, nor were they intended as showroom centerpieces or mass-market hits. Instead, they were special builds, equipped with the full 455 HO high-output package, Pontiac's top-of-the-line powerhouse engine boasting 370 horsepower. The inclusion of the 455 HO V8 in a convertible package was no small feat. Most muscle convertibles were already rare and often less powerful due to structural challenges and market demands. Yet these 17 cars were unapologetically wild. Real, raw muscle cars with open tops, snarling engines, and unmistakable Judge graphics. The rarity and timing of these cars make them almost ghost-like in muscle car history. They were built during the death throes of an era when muscle cars were losing favor to more fuel-efficient, safer, and emissions-compliant vehicles. GM's strategy was shifting away from these high-performance beasts, and shortly after 1971, the Judge nameplate was discontinued entirely. No flashy campaigns, no grand send-offs, just a quiet, almost mournful end to one of Pontiac's boldest chapters. For collectors and enthusiasts, the 1971 Judge convertibles represent something extraordinary. A fleeting moment when raw muscles still dared to thrive, even as the world was turning its back on the muscle car dream. Each of those 17 cars is incredibly rare, coveted for their powerful 455 HO engines, striking Judge aesthetics, and the sheer rarity of the convertible form, which was never officially promoted or heavily produced in this guise. Driving one of these cars today is like holding a piece of muscle car history that almost vanished into oblivion. They embody the clash of ambition and reality, an era's last roar before silence. These Judge convertibles, built with full muscle credentials, stand as a testament to Pontiac's brief but fiery rebellion against the inevitable decline, a final salute to power and performance that the muscle car world would never quite see again in the same way. Their rarity means these cars rarely appear outside of private collections or specialized auctions, often fetching prices that reflect not just their power and pedigree, but their symbolic weight as muscle car ghosts. Reminders of a loud, wild, and untamed chapter in American automotive history that flickered out all too quickly. The 1971 Pontiac GTO Judge convertible isn't just a collector's prize. It's a time capsule capturing the muscle car's final, fleeting blaze of glory. The 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS454 LS6 M22 is not just a muscle car, it's a legend wrapped in steel and raw power. One of the most coveted and rarest beasts to come out of the golden muscle car era. This car represents the apex of Chevrolet's muscle car engineering, combining the brutal might of the LS6 454 big block V8 with the nearly indestructible M22 4-speed manual transmission, known far and wide as the Rock Crusher. Together, this combination created a driving experience so fierce and uncompromising that it became the stuff of myth among gearheads and muscle car enthusiasts. The LS6 engine itself was already a powerhouse, officially rated at 450 horsepower and 500 lb-ft of torque, though many insiders and dyno tests suggest it actually pushed even more. This wasn't just an engine for speed, it was a torque monster that could bulldoze through the quarter mile with terrifying ease. The 454 cubic inch displacement gave it the ability to unleash massive low-end grunt and insane acceleration. But raw power alone didn't make this car special. What elevated the experience was the transmission choice, the M22 Rock Crusher. The M22 was a gearbox built like a tank, designed specifically to handle the tremendous torque of engines like the LS6 454. Its nickname, Rock Crusher, came from the harsh, metallic grinding sound it made during gear changes, a sound that muscle car fans both dreaded and revered. Unlike the smoother, more forgiving automatics or even other manual transmissions of the time, the M22 was unforgiving and required a skilled, confident driver to master it. Shifting this transmission was like wrestling a wild animal. It demanded precise timing and a firm hand. When you nailed a shift, the reward was pure mechanical connection to the car's brutal powertrain, but a missed shift could be costly. Chevrolet only produced fewer than 100 Chevelles in 1970, equipped with this rare M22 transmission combined with the LS6 engine. This scarcity is why these particular cars have become so legendary. Most buyers at the time, either intimidated by the transmission's difficulty or preferring the convenience of automatics, opted for the TH400 automatic instead, leaving the M22 models as elusive rarities in muscle car history. Today, these cars are almost mythical, prized gems in private collections and commanding premium prices at auctions. The rarity of the M22 LS6 Chevelle wasn't the only factor that made it special. It was the sheer driving experience. Unlike many muscle cars that softened their edge for comfort or drivability, the M22 LS6 was a pure, no-compromise machine. Every drive was raw and visceral. The engine's thunderous roar, the violent surge of torque, the mechanical grinding of the Rock Crusher transmission, and the car's aggressive stance combined to create a brutal, almost primal experience. It was a car built for those who wanted to feel every ounce of power directly, without electronic assists or cushy automatics dulling the sensation. Surviving examples of the LS6 M22 Chevelle are automotive treasures today. They carry the history of an era when muscle cars were at their fiercest, before insurance rates, emissions regulations, and corporate caution started watering down the rawness that defined the late 1960s and early 1970s. These cars are reminders of a time when manufacturers pushed the limits of engineering and daring drivers pushed those cars to their very edge. Collectors and enthusiasts cherish these cars not just for their rarity, but because owning one is like holding a piece of automotive history that few have touched. Each M22 LS6 Chevelle represents the peak of Chevrolet's muscle car program, a testament to American muscle car might at its most unfiltered. Whether tearing up the drag strip, rumbling down an open highway, or simply sitting on display, these cars continue to inspire awe and respect. They are loud, they are unforgiving, and they are the true embodiment of muscle car legend. In the end, the 1970 Chevrolet SS454 LS6 with the M22 Rock Crusher isn't just a car, it's an icon of raw American power, mechanical ferocity, and the untamed spirit of the muscle car era. It's a rare machine that challenges anyone behind the wheel, demanding respect and skill, and rewarding with one of the most unforgettable driving experiences in automotive history. Those who know it, revere it. Those who own it, guard it like treasure. And the legend of the Rock Crusher lives on, echoing through the ages as a symbol of muscle car greatness. The 1969 Pontiac Trans Am Ram Air 4 Coupe stands not just as a rare muscle car, but as one of the most exclusive, misunderstood, and almost mythical legends in American automotive history. With only 55 units ever produced, this was a car that existed almost in the shadows of the muscle car era, overshadowed by bigger names and flashier models, but secretly carrying the banner for raw, unfiltered performance and racing pedigree. It was the embodiment of Pontiac's fierce, uncompromising spirit at a time when the muscle car industry was beginning to feel the tightening grip of insurance companies, government regulations, and shifting consumer tastes. What made the Ram Air 4 Trans Am so special wasn't just its rarity, but what lay beneath the hood. The 400 cubic inch V8 was Pontiac's ultimate high-performance engine for the street, a refined and brutally powerful monster designed to deliver a visceral driving experience. While officially rated at 370 horsepower, enthusiasts and insiders knew the true output was far higher, with the engine able to spin to high RPMs like a race car's heart. It featured massive, free-flowing ram air heads, a radical camshaft designed for maximum power, solid lifters, and a high-capacity ram air induction system that rammed cool, dense air into the engine to extract every ounce of horsepower possible. Unlike more tame, emissions-compliant engines appearing elsewhere, this engine was unapologetically built for speed, acceleration, and domination on the street and the track. Despite this extraordinary performance potential, Pontiac's corporate overlords were cautious. The late 1960s marked the beginning of a muscle car crackdown. Insurance premiums were skyrocketing, emissions standards were tightening, and the government was watching muscle cars with suspicion. Pontiac management saw the Ram Air 4 as a double-edged sword, too powerful for public relations, too specialized for mass market appeal, and potentially inviting regulatory scrutiny. The result was minimal advertising and a quiet launch, with dealers often unsure how to sell such a hardcore beast to their typical customers. It was a classic case of a company caught between the muscle car legacy it wanted to uphold and the realities of a changing industry landscape. The body itself carried the unmistakable Trans Am styling cues, with aggressive yet functional Ram Air 4 badging and a more muscular stance compared to standard Trans Ams. The suspension was beefed up for cornering, and heavy-duty brakes were included to keep this snarling beast in check. But what truly set it apart was the exclusivity. Only 55 coupes were made, each one hand-assembled and delivered to a very select group of buyers who understood what they were getting: a street-legal race car disguised as a muscle coupe. This scarcity has made surviving examples today some of the rarest and most valuable American muscle cars on the collector market. Because of its extreme rarity and potent performance, the Ram Air 4 Trans Am quickly became a legend among muscle car aficionados, even if it never enjoyed widespread fame in its own time. Many of these cars were driven hard, raced fiercely, and then either lost to time or hidden away by collectors who understood their true value. The lack of mass market promotion and dealer support had only added to the mystique. This was a car for insiders, for true gearheads, for people who wanted the last and greatest expression of Pontiac's muscle car philosophy before the era came to an abrupt halt. Today, the 1969 Ram Air 4 Trans Am stands as a symbol of an era that was fading, but refused to die quietly. It is a living, breathing testament to the ingenuity and daring of Pontiac's engineers and designers, who, despite increasing pressures, poured their hearts into creating one of the most fearsome muscle cars ever made. Collectors prize these cars not just for their power or rarity, but for the story they tell. A story of muscle car glory days slipping away under the weight of new regulations and changing tastes, yet holding on to the fierce spirit of raw performance. Owning or even seeing a Ram Air 4 is like glimpsing a ghost from the past. An incredibly powerful, exclusive machine that carries the weight of a fading muscle car era, but remains timeless in its appeal. It is not just a car, it is a legend on wheels, a rare jewel that only a handful in the world will ever know or experience. This car encapsulates the highs and lows of American muscle car history, its peak in power, its struggle with corporate caution, and its enduring legacy as one of the most exclusive, intense, and cherished muscle cars ever produced. For muscle car purists and collectors, the 1969 Pontiac Trans Am Ram Air 4 Coupe isn't just a ride, it's a masterpiece of raw, wild horsepower, forged in a time when muscle was muscle, and anything less wasn't even worth considering.